welcome to another episode of Out from the Horrorbox. I'm your jolly old host, Dom, and in this double-stuffed episode, we have both remakes of the horror classic that inspired John Carpenter's Halloween, Black Christmas. First, we take a stab at the 2006 remake, that is very much a product of its time. Then we unmask the latest take on the film with 2019's updated version. So deck your halls, grab some hot cocoa, and get ready for a slaying time tonight. After the debut feature of Willard, a remake of an earlier 1971 film, failed to perform that well at the box office, Glenn Morgan had been approached by Dimension Films to write and direct the remake to Black Christmas from 1974. Morgan was a fan of the original and cited it as a predecessor to the modern slasher film, which influenced his decision to commit to remaking the film. Crystal Lowe, who's an actor, noted Morgan's admiration and aimed to take the film to a different level while respecting the fact that the original was a great movie to begin with. In conceiving a new idea for the script, Morgan had intended to rework elements of the original film that were left ambiguous or were implied, such as the cryptic phone calls that they were receiving at the sorority house. And then while writing the screenplay, Morgan received input from the film's original director, Bob Clark, who also came on as a producer, an executive producer for the remake. Clark gave Morgan his blessing, stating in an interview that the remake was still Black Christmas, but explored new subplots that had not been fleshed out in the 1974 film. Creating an extensive subplot for the film's killer, Billy, Morgan introduced a secondary killer and Billy's younger sister. Hopefully you've seen the film, so I'm not spoiling it before we get into the film. In the original film, that was just Billy. The names Billy and Agnes are just featured prominently in the obscene calls received by the sorority sisters, and that's kind of where we think that the character's name in the original one, like the killer's name, is Billy, because we get those calls. And I mean, obviously, like Bob Clark has said it, and other people have said it before, but like they never explicitly say that the killer's name is Billy. As he was crafting this new backstory for Billy, Morgan was inspired by the real-life serial killer Edmund Kemper, who, as a child, had been locked in the basement of his home by his mother, and he would later go on to murder not only her, but a lot of sorority women in I think it was like Sacramento, San Francisco, that area of California. And then the introduction of Agnes as a second killer was, according to Mary Elizabeth Winstead, incorporated in part to extend the film's narrative arc, given that the phone calls coming from inside the house plot twist from the 74 film was too familiar for contemporary audiences. People had seen that multiple times. I mean, not just with this film, but like When a Stranger Calls, and they'd heard that urban legend multiple times. So I think, yeah, you're right. Like, a lot of people were a little bit more familiar with that kind of, I don't want to say trope. Maybe it's a trope. I don't know. And then the relationship between Billy and Agnes also allowed Morgan room to explore themes of the family, which are also prevalent in the relationship between the female characters. And that in the 2014 interview, Morgan claimed that his inclusion of a second killer was under the urging of Dimension Films executives, namely, like, as always on this podcast, we are talking about something from Dimension Films in the late 90s into the early 2000s, maybe even a little further. We always know who the monster is. It's Harvey Weinstein. He's hiding behind everyone, especially the women. So he's the reason why a lot of this kind of feels a bit of a mess. We'll get to it later, but Morgan said, I felt that a $10 million movie, A Black Christmas, didn't need anyone's help. They should have left us alone. But they had to have the two killers, and they were after kids from the OC. We compromised a lot. And along those very lines, according to Morgan, he and James Wong had various disputes with Bob and Harvey Weinstein, specifically about the film's tone and the way it should end. Morgan's original script ended with Kelly and Lee in the hospital receiving a phone call from Billy, whom they believed to be dead. This scene, which Morgan had filmed and intended to, use as a way to homage the conclusion of the original film, that ending, however, was scrapped by Bob Weinstein, who requested Morgan write and shoot a different ending that ultimately is the more violent conclusion that we see in the theatrical cut. It has Billy being impaled on the hospital's Christmas tree topper. And as a result of all these cuts that were made during post-production, there are two different cuts of Black Christmas that exist. One that was released in Europe and one that was released in North America, which feature slight variations. The European cut has about 4 minutes, or it's about 4 minutes shorter than the North American cut, and features an alternative death scene and ending. Once production had ended in Vancouver, Bob and Harvey Weinstein again oversaw the shooting of additional footage in LA that was intended only for promotional material. And according to Morgan, he was contacted by the Weinsteins, who wanted to pick up some shots for the TV spots, and he agreed. Among the footage shot was Lacey Chabert being dragged through the snow, footage of a woman falling from a roof, where there's like a weird lawnmower, like electric Christmas light thing, an unidentified woman discovering a woman floating beneath the frozen lake, Michelle Trachtenberg aiming a shotgun and saying, "Merry Christmas, motherfucker," to the camera, and additional shots of Trachtenberg in a hallway holding a shotgun while Billy levitates above her on the ceiling. This footage, which was never incorporated into the film, did appear in the official theatrical trailer as well as television spots. So with all that, let's get into Black Xmas.
"15 years ago, on Christmas Eve, his family became his victims.
What have you done?
Now,
all roads and airports are officially closed. This one is not gonna let up.
a group of college friends
That sucks. Everyone should be home for Christmas.
are about to discover
Lauren, we're opening up presents.
Why don't you open the present we got you?
their house
I got it.
is his home.
All is calm, all is bright. Who is in my house tonight?
Don't you have lots of toys to deliver to good little boys and girls?
You really shouldn't provoke somebody like that.
And on December 25th,
You're definitely getting punked.
Is that Santa's reindeer?
all he wants for Christmas
Is Megan in her room?
is a new family he can treat like his very own.
You're my family now.
Black Christmas.
Billy Lenz is born in 1970 with severe jaundice due to liver disease and is constantly abused by his mother, Constance. 5 years later, Constance and her lover murder Billy's father, Frank, on Christmas Eve and bury his body in the house's crawl space. Billy witnesses their scheme, so they lock him in the attic. Then, flash forward to 1982. Constance rapes Billy to conceive another child since her boyfriend is impotent and gives birth to their daughter, Agnes. On Christmas Day, 1991, Billy escapes from the attic and disfigures the 8-year-old Agnes by gouging out her eye. Then he brutally murders his mother and her lover. He's caught by the police eating cookies made out of his mother's flesh and is sent to a mental asylum, while Agnes is taken to a local orphanage. Billy, Constance, and his stepfather are played by Robert Mans, Karen Conoval, and Howard Siegel, respectively. 15 years later, Billy kills a man visiting the sanitarium dressed as Santa Claus, takes his costume, and escapes from his cell on Christmas Eve. He heads to his former home, which has been turned into a sorority house for Delta Alpha Kappa at Clement University in New Hampshire. At the house, Claire Crosby, played by Leela Sylvester, one of the sorority sisters, sits and drinks wine as she wraps presents. As she writes a note, she is murdered in her bedroom by an unknown figure. Meanwhile, Megan Helms, played by Jessica Harmon, begins to hear noises and goes up to the attic to investigate. Upon finding Claire's corpse, Megan is attacked and killed by the same assailant. In the living room, the other sorority sisters, Kelly Presley, Melissa Kitt, Heather Fitzgerald, Dana Mathis, and Lauren Hannon, along with their house mother, Mrs. Mack, receive a threatening call from the killer. They are played by Katie Cassidy, Michelle Trachtenberg, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Lacey Chabert, Crystal Lowe, and Andrea Martin, respectively. Claire's half-sister, Lee Colvin, played by Kristen Cloak, soon arrives, searching for her. Kelly's boyfriend, Kyle Autry, played by Oliver Hudson, arrives as well, but is kicked out when Kelly discovers Megan's sex video with him. When the power goes out, Dana goes to the main breaker under the house, but encounters the figure in the crawl space and is killed. When they realize Dana's ambushed by the figure, the remaining sorority sisters and Lee go outside to find her, only to find their fellow sister, Eve Agnew, killed in her car. With the police unable to arrive in time due to the storm that's been brewing, Callie, Melissa, and Lee decide to stay inside the house while Heather and Mrs. Mack flee. In the car, Heather is murdered, and Mrs. Mack is impaled by a falling icicle. While Callie and Lee descend to the garage to investigate, Melissa is attacked and killed by the assailant. Kelly and Lee return upstairs and find Lauren's eyeless corpse. Kyle returns to the house, and the three go to investigate the attic. While ascending the ladder, Kyle is dragged into the attic to his death by the assailant, who is revealed to be Agnes, now an adult. Agnes is played by Dean Friss. As Billy enters the attic, Kelly and Agnes struggle, leading the two of them into the empty space between the walls of the house. As the killers converge towards Kelly, Lee helps her escape before they start a fire, leaving Billy and Agnes to burn to death. Later, as Kelly and Lee recover at the hospital, Billy, who is partially burned, kills the morgue assistant. While Kelly goes for an x-ray, Agnes appears in her hospital room and kills Lee. When Kelly returns to her room, Agnes appears through the ceiling and attacks her. But Kelly uses a defibrillator to kill Agnes. Moments later, Billy enters through the ceiling and chases Kelly to the stairwell. They briefly fight, ending with Kelly pushing Billy off the railing, where he is subsequently impaled on the tip of a Christmas tree, killing him. black guys, so that was Black Xmas. Let's get into some trivia about the film, then we'll move into the kill counter, then we'll kind of get into some things later. So our first bit of trivia, most of the sorority sisters in the film were named after famous singers who made memorable Christmas songs. Kelly Presley was Elvis Presley, obviously. Melissa Kitt, Eartha Kitt. Dana Mathis, Johnny Mathis. Claire Crosby, Bing Crosby. Lee Colvin, Sean Colvin. Megan Helms, Bobby Helms. Heather Lee Fitzgerald gets 2 names. Brenda Lee and Ella Fitzgerald. Lauren Hannon and Eva Agnew appear to be the only sorority sisters who are not named after any singer. And Barbara McHenry, who's played by Andrea Martin, doesn't count because she's named after a character from the original film. But other than that, I think that's a pretty cool thing. I like that they decided to do that. Like, that's a pretty cool way of like naming characters that actually it makes sense to the story too. None of their names really jump out as oh wow, yeah, okay, yeah, oh, I see it right there. I didn't even see that until or I didn't get that until reading this, and I was like, wow, you know what, I like that. I like that idea of just taking a bunch of singers of that genre of the like Christmas to kind of tie it all together and just naming them after them. That's pretty cool. I like that. So Glenn Morgan originally wanted either Margot Kidder or Andrea Martin, who were both in the original Black Christmas, to play the house mother in the movie, to pay respect to the 1974 film, obviously. And when they were able to get Andrea Martin, it would have been cool to get Margot Kidder or even Elizabeth Hussey to come back for the film. But I think Margot Kidder might have been sick at that time. I think she died of cancer. I'm not sure, but she passed away. And I think I don't know if Elizabeth Hussey would have done it, but I'm glad that they got at least somebody, right? You got Andrea Martin to come back for the remake, and just over 30 years is a crazy amount of time between films, and to finally come back for something that really was a big influence on the film that would go on to spawn all the slasher films. It's so weird that it's this film does, or the original one does a lot of what Halloween would do, but just before it. It's kind of crazy. So the film's color palette and the Christmas decorations were intentionally pushed with that kind of overtly red color scheme as a choice stylistically by Morgan, who kind of wanted to invoke the idea of an American Christmas, which he characterized as being a cross between Washington Irving and Coca-Cola. And you can really kind of feel that. And it makes for this kind of feeling of, that's kind of what I get from it. But at the same time, it also kind of takes all that bland, look from, I don't know, bland is right, but of the Scream copycat. So it's funny because the original one inspired Halloween, which spawned all these slasher film, these slashers that were just kind of retreads of that film, and then Scream kind of inspired a whole new wave of slashers to kind of be kind of meta a little bit, and they all kind of had this kind of look or style, and it really is in this that you kind of see that kind of look. And so maybe it's just from the way that they're that from that time period, but if you look at this, you look at Friday the 13th, the remake, you look at I Know What You Did Last Summer, all those films Dimension brought out at the time after Scream, they kind of have that same I don't want to say the same thing as a color palette, but they just kind of feel they're all in the same universe. You know what I mean? They all could exist in the same place. And it's just so weird that, like, even though, like, he's going for something that he thinks is different stylistically, it still kind of falls into that trap of looking like a movie from, like, the mid 2000s, like early to, like, that, just even the 2000s. Like, it just looks like that. At time of release, the film caused an uproar of controversy from Christian groups because of the studio's decision to release the film on Christmas Day. There were several groups, including Liberty Council in operation, just saying Merry Christmas, and they called the film offensive, ill-founded, and insensitive. LA Weekly columnist Nikki Fink also questioned the filmmaker's decision to release the film on Christmas. Dimension Films defended the timing, saying there's a long tradition of releasing horror movies around the holiday season, which they're right, as counter-programming to the more regular Yuletide fare. And along those lines, film historian Michael Gurnau of the Horror Review countered Liberty Council's complaint. Writings such as crimes occur throughout the year, including Christmas, as recently as a year prior in McLean and Great Falls, Virginia, to be exact. So yes, just like crime, it never stops, even for the holidays. So horror films should never stop, even for the holidays, for the Christmas season. Oh, just because you guys want to celebrate this and that, whatever, tradition and family and whatever, like, doesn't mean that we can't have a glut of horror-themed Christmas movies. And I love that we still do that. To this day, there's still, like, Violent Night just came out not long ago. Isn't there, like, a White Christmas one? Or, oh no, it's the one that's, like, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Knife. That's what it's called. And I might be reviewing for that one for Christmas. Glenn Morgan has, I guess, disowned this film. In response to the question of whether or not he was happy with the results, he said, "No way. It's schizophrenic because Bob Weinstein came in and urinated on it. Really, there was a time where torture porn was the hot thing. You know, I became friends with Bob Clark. You can throw that movie into one of your first questions. I love that movie and also A Christmas Story. And I learned a lot from Bob and had his blessing that we were trying to make a version that he didn't get to deal with the background of the killers and stuff like that. Well, Bob Weinstein came in and saw that, and he was like, we need to drag Michelle Trachtenberg down the hall by her eyes. I was like, oh, Lord. I talked to my agent and lawyer and Kristen about it. I'm not sure who that is. And it was humiliating. It was horrible. I stayed to try and protect the cast and crew, friends of mine, and ended up taking it on the chin. And you can kind of see that in the film. Like, this film is very disjointed. There's times where I'm like, I literally had to, like, rewind this film multiple times because I was, like, not only confused on some of the, I don't know if I'm gonna get into it right here, but there's a lot that I was just like, why, what, huh, and, like, to get to certain things, it's very convoluted, like, and, like, yeah. I'll save it for my final thoughts, but let's just say I very wholeheartedly agree with Glenn Morgan on his disowning of this film. I would do the same thing too. I'd be like, just take my name out. Just put Alan Smethy on there. Like, I guess a credit's a credit, but, like, I don't know. We'll get into it later. In the original script, the tone was much more serious, with a noticeable lack of black comedy. Lee lived in the end along with Melissa, who also who only died in the film because Michelle Trachtenberg would not do the film unless her character died. As well, Billy had died in the mental asylum long before the events of the film. Agnes was the main antagonist, the soul killer of the film, and was only rewritten to be Billy's accomplice because of studio interference, and you can kind of see that. And I'll get to that's another thing. I'll just remember that for later. Let's put a pin in that. Agnes was also supposed to be his half sister, not his daughter / sister. The incestuous conception of Agnes via Billy being raped by his mom was thrown in purely for shock value at the insistence of the studio. Oh, I wonder who. Maybe Schmob Weinstein? Or was it like Barvey Schmeinstein? I wonder which one of them was like, you know what this movie needs more of? Incest. That's just like ridiculous and disgusting. The original ending has Kelly and Lee killing Agnes and being rushed to the hospital, and I think that would have been a little bit more better ending. And I think I know where they would have gone with that, where they would have been at the hospital or something, or maybe you can even cut to like a day later at the house, and then they get a phone call, and it's like the obscene phone calls again, as in like the way that the original one kind of ended. And it would have made more sense. It would have been a better ending overall. Would have been a better movie. But, sometimes dimension and the Weinstein brothers ruin your film. And so, to wrap everything up, there were 3 alternative endings shot for the film. The first ending had Lee and Kelly engaging in a heartwarming talk, with Lee opening Claire's present. The ending concluded with Kelly getting a call from Kyle's phone, implying either Agnes or Billy survived. The second ending had Lee being brought to the morgue to examine Agnes's body, only to find Claire's body, revealing that Agnes escaped while Billy dies from his burns. The ending concludes with Lee being killed by Agnes, and Kelly electrocuting Agnes and being picked up by her parents. This ending was used in the UK version. And then the third and final ending had the morticians discovering Billy's body is missing, while a shot inside a smoke detector on the wall reveals that Billy escaped. That's very strange and very specific. All right, that's kind of weird. But yeah, that I'm kind of like, oh, I guess that makes more sense for the UK version, and like I think it would have made more sense for this movie too. I'm not sure about the first ending or the third one, but that second ending honestly probably would have been maybe the best, and the way I thought it would have gone. But whatever. Now let's move on to the kill counter. Kill counter. Black Xmas has a total of 18 deaths and kills. So let's figure out who stabbed who as we look at each one by one. So we start off with Claire, who is stabbed in the head with a calligraphy pen as she's trying to wrap her presents and get a little tipsy. The security guard next is stabbed in the neck with a candy cane. And then we switch back to the house and we get to see Megan stabbed about 4 to 5 times and her eyes ripped out. And those are both, Claire and Megan are both done by Agnes. The security guard is Billy, and we move on. And as we move on, Billy will kill the Santa Claus, the guy dressed up as Santa Claus who's walking around the sanitarium. We're not shown exactly how he's killed, but we do know that he's killed when he takes the suit as a way to escape. Then in the flashback, one of the first flashbacks, we see that Billy's father, Franklin, is killed by his mother, Constance, and his stepdad. He gets his head bashed in 4 times with a hammer, and they bury him under the house in the crawl space. Then in the flashback, but as we move forward into the 90s, we get to see Billy's stepfather stabbed through the eye with the tree topper. and Constance Lenz, who's beaten 13 times with a rolling pin, and then gets her flesh made into cookies, I guess, or he bakes her skin at least, or whatever he uses to cookie cut out of her body, and he makes a meal out of that, and he sits there and eats them until the police and everyone show up and they take him away. Next, we get Dana, who's stabbed twice with a gardening cultivator, and I believe that's Agnes as well, who kills him. Eve is found decapitated. I think that one is implied to be Billy because it's outside she's sitting in her car, and when they open the door, that's when her head falls out. Heather's killed off screen in the car by Billy. So, I guess that would make sense, that Eve would be killed, and then he would go to their car, hide, and he kills her, and her blood splatters on the window, and that causes Miss Mac to not see the icicle drop from the roof, and gets impaled in her head. And so she's not really killed by anybody. She just happens to die a horrible death that is impaling through the head with an icicle. Melissa is scalped with ice skates later, and I believe that's Agnes. Lauren is stabbed in the head with a glass unicorn, and I believe that one might be Billy. I think it kind of goes back and forth. Kyle is stabbed in the head, and I think that one's Agnes, I'm pretty sure. And then we get the whole fire, and we think, they're gonna die in the fire. And then, nope. They come back to the hospital. They end up killing one of the guys in the morgue, and he's killed off screen with a bone saw. Lee has her neck snapped, and I believe that one's by Agnes. And then finally, we get Agnes Lenz and Billy Lenz. Agnes appears, and after she kills Lee by snapping her neck, she goes after Kelly and starts to choke her. Kelly tries all her might to get Agnes off of her, but she is finally able to turn the defibrillator and grab the paddles, and she electrocutes Agnes's face and fries her with the defibrillator. Billy then chases Kelly through the hospital, and they get into a fight, and as they're struggling, she throws him over the railing down the stairs, but is impaled through his back on the top of a Christmas tree. And so those were all the deaths and kills in Black Xmas. Alright, so let's move on to Black Christmas from 2016. Producer Jason Blum revealed that in June 2019, that he was set to produce a remake of the 1974 film Black Christmas through Blumhouse Productions, and that Adam Hendricks from Studio Divide and Conquer and Ben Cosgrove would also help to produce, and Greg Gilreath and Zach Locke, also from Divide and Conquer, would serve as executive producers for the project. And then also in June of that same year, Sophia Takal was announced as the film's director, having previously worked on the Into the Dark series on Hulu for Blum, while Imogen Poots, Ellie Shannon, Brittany O'Grady, Lily Donahue, and Caleb Eberhardt were cast in the film. Also that month, Carrie Elwes was added to the cast. The director, Takal, worked extensively to make this vision of Black Christmas as feminist as she could. And she stated in her interview, "I wanted to make a movie where instead of feeling objectified or watched from a distance, the audience felt seen. It is the first Black Christmas in which Bob Clark was not had any involvement in. Obviously, he was dead at the time, and he passed away back in 2007. Bob Clark, as we had said earlier, he produced and directed the original film, and he was an executive producer on the 2006 remake Unlike the previous two versions, though, of Black Christmas, this remake was rated PG-13 by the MPAA, a rating to call sought in hopes of making it as accessible to new audiences, especially young women who were interested in horror, and opening up discussions on major issues like sexual assault, although she was ready to fully commit to utilizing the higher R rating if the ratings board would not grant it. However, she would not use the PG-13 rating to water down the film's violence to a large degree, making it only slightly less violent than the original film. So, with all that said, let's get straight into Black Christmas 2019.
It's my privilege to teach you this semester. Enjoy your winter breaks and Merry Christmas.
What's up, ladies? Excited for tonight?
It is our last day of our last fall semester of college ever.
Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring.
Can you take a photo of all of us?
Of course.
Where's Helena?
She was patting back a sodas earlier, but she looked really good.
Cheese.
We shouldn't have let her go back by herself. She's fine. Come on, live a little.
In the frosty air.
No, wait. Helena hasn't gotten home yet.
If I were missing, I'd want you to unleash the bloodhounds and track me down.
She was at DKO last night.
Still creating problems, all right?
Hello? Hello? I'm worried that something bad happened.
It's winter break. Could just be a delay of some sort. Snow.
My friend is missing.
9 times out of 10, the girl's just with a boyfriend.
I will bring you to your knees.
There's someone in the house.
What the?
This can't be real.
This school has 200 years of history. Many sacrifices have been made to keep our traditions alive.
You're all insane. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of running. Go, 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 go!
Ho, 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 bitch. You messed with the wrong sisters.
While walking home, Hawthorne College student Lindsay, played by Lucy Curry, is killed by a masked individual. Riley Stone, played by Imogen Poots, is a sorority sister at Mu Kappa Epsilon and has been struggling with PTSD after being raped by Delta Kappa Omicron fraternity president Brian Huntley, who was played by Ryan McIntyre. Meanwhile, her sorority sister Chris, played by Elise Shannon, has angered the DKL fraternity and Professor Glenson, played by Carrie Alves, following a petition from her requesting the university founder Calvin Hawthorne's bus be moved from the main building, and another requesting Glenson be fired due to his refusal to teach books written by women. Riley and Chris, along with their friends Maddie, Jess, and Helena, and they are played by Lily Donahue, Brittany O'Grady, and Madeline Adams, respectively, arrive at the DKO fraternity for the talent show, where Riley discovers new pledges for DKO, engaging in a ritual around Hawthorne's bust. She saves a drunken Helena from being sexually assaulted by a DKO member and takes Helena's place in the talent show. Upon seeing Brian in the crowd, she performs a song with her sorority sisters condemning the rape culture at the fraternity. Later, Helena is abducted by Lindsay's attacker, while Riley begins to bond with Landon, a kind-hearted frat boy played by Caleb Eberhardt. The girls start to receive threatening text messages from an account posing as Calvin Hawthorne, similar to what Lindsay had received before she was murdered. The next day, sorority sister Fran, played by Natalie Morris, is attacked and killed by the masked assailant. While searching for Helena, Riley encounters Glenson and finds his list of the MKE girls. She reports the disappearances to campus police, but they refuse to help. That night, Riley and Chris argue over Chris's posting of the performance, in which Riley reveals at the end that Brian raped her. As Riley blames Chris for the threatening messages from DKO, Marty argues with her boyfriend Nate and demands that he leave. After Jesse is killed by the assailant, the girls are also attacked, leaving Marty injured. Chris discovers Jesse's body, while Nate arrives to apologize and is also murdered. Riley kills the assailant, but the girls are attacked by the two other individuals. Marty dies while Riley and Chris kill the attacker and identify him as the DKO pledge she saw at the ritual earlier. The two escape in Nate's car, and Riley theorizes that Hawthorne, who is known for practicing black magic, is responsible for the murders via his bust, which emits black liquid. Chris suggests they go to the police, but Riley demands they go to the fraternity, and the two separate. Riley enlists Landon to help her enter the fraternity. Chris discovers Lindsay's sorority sisters also being attacked by DKO and rescues them. At the DKO house, the frat brothers force Landon to become a pledge. Riley discovers Helena, who is tied up, before being knocked unconscious by a DKO member. She wakes up tied up, while confronted by Glenson, Bryant, and other DKO members. Glenson reveals that after Chris forced the bus relocation, they discovered Hawthorne's plan, involving a spell and black liquid to control women. The liquid allows the spirit of Hawthorne to possess the fraternity's pledges and send them out to murder women they deem unruly. Helena has been secretly working with the fraternity and stole items from her sisters that allowed the possessed pledges to locate their targets. Helena is murdered before Chris and the other sorority sisters attack the fraternity. Riley overpowers Brian and smashes the Hawthorne bus. Chris sets Glenson on fire, and the women and Landon escape, locking the frat brothers inside and leaving them to burn to death. Okay, so let's get into some trivia for Black Christmas 2019. The dance sequence with the sorority sisters in the Santa-inspired dresses was meant to be a derogatory reference to Mean Girls, as Sophia Takal wanted the film to reinforce the bonds of sisterhood, as she felt Mean Girls was too misogynistic for pitting the girls against each other, which Lacey Chabert was in both that film and the first Black Christmas remake. Imogen Poots also said in an interview that she felt the scene where they sang Up in the Frat House was an important message for abused women. Honestly, I think that's a pretty good comparison on something you kind of want to pit against for a movie, especially if you're going for something that's more like a feminist take on something. Yeah, you would kind of bring up something like that. Mean Girls, yeah, right? Like, it is kind of misogynistic for pitting the girls against each other. I don't know. I love Mean Girls. It's still pretty fun, but I did like this rendition of Up in the Frat House, because it calls out that horrible culture that there's fraternities and how a lot of those guys just get away with everything because, you're going to ruin this poor rich young white boy's future, even though he already has a guarantee because his dad already has a position for him lined up, and it doesn't even matter if he actually graduates or not. He's getting the job no matter what, and he's set for life. That poor boy. Ridiculous. Director Sophia Takal said in an interview that she wanted to explore the same premise as the 1974 original, but with a Me Too style twist and a celebration of the bonds of sisterhood. Between that and the PG-13 rating, horror audiences avoided the film. Reviews were scathing and didn't do nearly as well as the studio hoped. But I will say, like, she did a pretty good job exploring the themes that she wanted to. I kind of understand where she's coming from with, wanting to take because that very, like, POV centric idea of looking through the eyes of the killer, that, like I said, heavily influenced Halloween. But for that, taking that and kind of bringing it back to a kind of a third person look, I don't know. I wish they kind of would have incorporated some of that, maybe like before we got to see who was under the mask for some of them. But I get where she was going with, wanting to, call out like the rape culture, especially during like towards the end of the Me Too movement, and like just bring it more as a positive look for women. Honestly, I thought it was a pretty good time. I liked it a lot. I'm gonna get into my in my final thoughts, but honestly, I think she did what she wanted to do. Did it falter here and there? Maybe. I think maybe the PG-13 rating might have hurt it a little bit. I think you could have gone a little bit harder on some of the violence, because it really wasn't a lot of gore and violence, and the fact that they were using the black goo that was coming out of them instead of blood, and that's another thing. Another trivia point is that the black goo that fraternity brothers believe is meant to represent literal toxic masculinity and how it affects men and changes them from humans into monsters. And it was also used as a way because they weren't allowed to show the red colored blood in a PG-13 rated film, and I think that kind of hurt it as well. Around the time that Halloween, the 2018 sequel, was theatrically released, producer Jason Blum received backlash for saying that the reason why there are no female directors hired by his company, Blumhouse, was because there are only a few female directors and even fewer wanted to do horror. He eventually apologized within 24 hours after coming under fire for his comments, obviously. And following that, Blum commissioned Sophia Takal to helm this remake for a 2019 release, making her the first woman in the company's history to direct a Blumhouse horror film. And it does suck that, like, it has to be after making such comments. But at least, I think that led to a few other female directors coming on, and I think, was it Five Nights at Freddy's? Yeah, and that was Blumhouse. And that was directed by another female director. And so I'm glad that he's not just like, just completely dismissing them outright. And finally, we end on Riley's subplot about having been raped and no one but her friends believing her is a reference to the rape culture and campus rape narrative prevalent on college campuses. It also takes inspiration from the Brock Turner case, which, for those of you who don't know, I'm pretty sure that guy is the one who, like, the judge was like, we can't ruin this poor boy, this poor rich white man's future, because, I mean, sure, none of his employers are going to look into his background and use that against him because he's white and a man. So we still can't ruin it at all. So that's why we can't give him any jail time for anything he's ever done. Like, you want to ruin this poor boy's life? It's ridiculous. That is how we still are at we're not even at a point where even that's ridiculous. The whole idea is ridiculous, and I'm glad that they called it out in this movie. I think it needed to be, and especially coming from a film where, like, yeah, that was like kind of like the main purpose of like the original Black Christmas was like showing like this woman who, you know, she's getting an abortion even though she told her boyfriend and he doesn't want her to, but she's gonna do it anyways because, see, for at the time in 74, that was more the like feminist thing to do. Like, this is, oh, look at how radical she is. And I feel like this is just showing the spirit of what that film was and is still today. Kill Counter. Okay, so though 2019's Black Christmas is not rated R, nor does it show a lot of gore, there are a total of 27 deaths, which is crazy, even for a horror film. Let's see who's doing the most kills and which death passes the hazing. We start the film off with Lindsay as she thinks she's being stalked in the streets by some guy following her. Turns out that guy is just some random guy who's just trying to get home. And she gets stabbed in the face, or I think in the head with the, or I'm not sure if I can't remember. I just saw the film and I can't remember. She got stabbed with an icicle. I remember that, but I can't remember if she got stabbed in the head or the face or just in the stomach. Well, whatever. Next, we get Franny. She's strangled with Christmas lights in her room as she's looking for her little kitty. Next, we see Jessie get killed off. Well, she's killed off screen. We don't get to see her, but in the face with a mirror shard. Next, once, you know, because it takes a while for everything to start getting into full gear. Jessie's where it kind of gets really into it, and then from there, after Nate comes back and he's trying to apologize and they're trying to figure out like what's going on, that's when the next mask guy comes out of nowhere and he hits him in the face. Well, doesn't hit him, he shoots him in the face with an arrow. And then we get to see one of the masked attackers, one of the Deke pledges, as he's attacking, I believe it is Imogen Poots' character. She's able to grab the keys and stab him in the neck with the keys, killing him. But when they remove the mask, it's just like, because they're like, oh, what's this black goo? That's when they kind of start putting things together that it's some kind of magic. Next, Marty is shot with an arrow and gets hacked with a hatchet, which is kind of crazy. Then two more masked attackers are there. One is stabbed in the back and the head with a knife. The other stabbed in the front with a glass unicorn. Then finally the security officer, Gil O'Leary, shows up, but he gets stabbed in the back with a knife. From there, another masked attacker, he gets suffocated to death with a dry cleaning bag. Helena, once we find out that she has turned on everyone, you know, they knocked out Imogen Poots. They bring her back to where the bust is that they have inside the fraternity house, and you see more of the black goo, and they start explaining things, and we learn that Helena's villain, and she's been working with them the whole time. They kill her. She gets her neck broken by a masked pledge. And then we get another masked pledge who gets killed. Gets shot through the back with an arrow. And then finally, at the end, with Professor Gelson, Brian Huntley, Phil, and 12 other Deeks, they are locked in the house as it's burned to the ground, and we don't. I mean, they burn to death. They die in the fire. So they're not coming back for another sequel or a remake or anything. But yeah, I mean, like I said, even for a horror film, 27 deaths is a pretty wild amount. Like, that's a crazy amount right there, because I mean, even something like a Halloween doesn't have that much. even like what was the one I just reviewed, or the reviewed for Thanksgiving, that had a pretty high one. I think it was like 11, and I was saying that was a high amount, like 27. Like most like slashers don't, they boast about having high death counts or kill counts, but they end up kind of coming up short sometimes. Unless I think they really go out of their way, like the newer Halloween, the trilogy that came out, like they went out of their way to be like, yeah, see, this is a more brutal Michael. He's just going around killing more, taking more names, kicking more ass. That you don't really normally see that many deaths in film, and I think, I mean, like I said, for something that's not even rated R, and we get 27 deaths, I'm sure a lot of that is due to, you know, like locking them in the house and burning it down. But that's like about less than half of the 27 deaths. We're still getting a pretty good amount of deaths just like from them, like the slashers killing people, them killing the group of slashers. So it's a pretty good amount. Pretty good. Now we come to the part of the podcast where I give my final thoughts on both films. And let's just start with the 2006 remake of Black Xmas, or Black Christmas, whatever, however you want to say it. I like saying Black Xmas because I think that they went specifically out of their way to be like, it's Black Xmas. See, because we're different. It's not just your same. It's not your grandpa's Black Christmas. It's for a new generation, a generation that knows meta and knows how slashers work and this and that, blah blah blah. Honestly, I did not really like this film a lot. I normally don't even review a film if I don't like it, because I don't think it's worth my time to sit here and tell you this was terrible because see this, and this. And it's not for like it's for story reasons. It's for the reasons why most movies during that time, as I brought up, just, you know, feel either incomplete. They feel like somebody went through and like there's some other story here. They changed things too much. They cut too much. They changed too much. They wanted too much to get down to either PG-13, or if they're going to go for an R, they're still going to soften it. They're not going to give us like as much gore or blood as we would like. And the fact that, like, I get what you're doing with, so like the original Black Christmas is, I think, I had never seen it until last year, and I reviewed it. And honestly, I was left feeling like, wow, this was an undiscovered gem by me. Why have I not seen this yet? Why did it take me so long to watch this movie? I can see everything that like John Carpenter decided to do in Halloween. He literally took Black Christmas and was like, what if I just made a sequel to that and called it Halloween? And that's literally what he did. And you can see all of Halloween's DNA comes from that movie and Psycho. It's all coming from these places before, and it kind of sucks that like that and like Texas Chainsaw and Psycho and like Peeping Tom, they don't get the full recognition from everyone all the time, but they deserve it. Like Black Christmas, 1974, masterpiece. I think because it is so simple, it's not too long, it's subtle, it's creepy, and like the kills, and I love that this person is just stalking you in your house. Like, And I love that the house is big enough to where, yeah, you can't always hear like things that are going on in another part of the house. Somebody could just sneak in and kill you in one part of the house, sneak over to the other part of the house, kill someone else. And the idea of these like phone calls and the ambiguity, it's amazing. And the 2006 remake ruins all that. And it's not too like Glenn Morgan, because I can tell that he wanted to give us a story that was more to explain things. He wanted to kind of give you more of a reason. I think it's like what Rob Zombie did with the remake of Halloween. And see, Rob Zombie kind of was given a blank check to do what he wanted. John Carpenter kind of said, to do what you want. This isn't what I would do, but you can do what you want. You're more famous now than you were before. You can kind of pull things and change things that you want. I think Glenn Morgan didn't have that kind of say, and like was able to stand up to the Weinsteins to be like, no, this is what I want to do. So of course they come in, they change some of the background, they adjust a lot during the production and what we're gonna see, and then they add film all these things that are just supposed to be promotional, and it's like, why, when it's like that's not what the film is, that's not what it's trying to do. It's trying to be like this original one, but you guys ruined it. I think the acting is okay. Michelle Trachtenberg does pretty good. So does Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Does pretty good. What's the main actress? What's her name? I forget her name. Sorry. Oh, Katie Cassidy. I think she does okay. Too. Lacey Chabert's fine. Andrea Martin does okay. I don't like that Agnes is just literally just straight up played by a guy. I think that's weird. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I don't, like, it's clearly a man and he's just got long hair. Like, are they trying to insinuate something? Were they trying to be like, oh, Agnes was actually like a boy, and then they treated her like a girl? I don't get that. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's clearly, and then literally the fact that they made them add this kind of connection of him being her dad does not make sense to when you see them later in the film, because he looks like he hasn't aged since the 90s, and she looks like she's like way older than him. And then not only that, like, some of the timeline doesn't work. Like, I was having to sit there and rewind this film over and over again because I was like, I don't understand what is going on. I don't get this. Like, the timelines, because they were saying that he killed his mom and stepdad in 91, but then the what's her name, Lee was saying that she went to school there, I think in 93, and then what's his name, Kyle is saying how the house was like, oh, the boogeyman's house. Like, oh, you tried growing up here and it was like scary. It's like, okay, wait, how old are you though? Because if you're, let's just say you're like 18, 20, right? That would mean in 2006, let's say you're 20, that means you would be in 10 years before, and 96 was 10. So then 5 years earlier, you'd be 5. Well, you're running around at 5 and you're like, this house is still being occupied. So you would have known the people there. I don't know. There's just a lot to this. I'm like, I did not like this. There were certain elements that I liked. I like like that they named them after singers. I really wish if it had been now, I know like Mary Elizabeth Winstead probably would have been the main person, maybe even Michelle Trachtenberg or something, but I don't know, some of her deaths were just like, huh? There's just a lot of convoluted things too, like the power turning off, which isn't convoluted. I just mean it just conveniently happens when they're right by. They just happen to get to the laptop then, and she just happened to leave it open. I don't know, and I know that happens in like other movies, but this one, I don't know. It's just this is the same reason. This is the reason why I don't like talking about films that I don't like, because when I see it and I got to the end, I was like, that was dumb. I could see why it has such a bad score on Rotten Tomatoes and why people give it such guff. It's not a good movie. It's not even like, to me, it wasn't even campy and fun. It just was boring. I was having, the only campy stuff was like the flashback stuff, but that was about it. That was only like a little bit of the film. And even that's just like, why? Why did you have to do that? Like, which Weinstein brother was like, yeah, we need to have incest in there. Yeah. Make sure you put it in there. Yeah, put it in there. Put in the incest. Disgusting. Like, I was like, why? What does this have to do with anything? Like, you could have even said, like, yeah, like, it's his half-sister, and maybe, like, he's seeing her, and he's just jealous. I don't know. There's just a lot about that one. I don't like it. I just thought it was a dumb film. It doesn't hold anything to the spirit of the 1974 one. Yeah. I don't recommend it at all. But let's get into the 2019 remake, or reimagining, I guess. And I will say I did like this one. I'm not saying it's great by any standards. Is it good? It's fine. I think Imogen Poots does great. She always does good in these films, in the films that she's always in. If you haven't seen Vivarium, watch that one with her and Jesse Eisenberg. That's a fucked up film. Watch it. She was in something else. I just looked up her IMDb. I forgot what else she was in, but she's in a few things, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot she was in that. Everyone else is pretty good. Cary Elwes is great as always. He's very sinister in this. You can tell he's the villain to begin with. I love that, it touches on, this idea of like, yeah, frat houses are a very toxic place. They're very misogynistic. They're very homophobic. They're very transphobic. They're very, they think they can just get away with a lot of things, and they can hurt a lot of people who are just trying to get an education. And I think the way that Sophia Takal took this idea of the spirit of the original one being known for, being more of a feminist look and like on like the women in the sorority, taking that to the next level of where it would be today. I think that works pretty well for this film. Honestly, I think it does, because that's exactly at that time, at that state of the world in 2019. It was pre-pandemic. What we were concerned about was like, we need to focus more on, Me Too, Time's Up, all this stuff, and especially coming from this is the second remake, and the first remake was done by the Weinsteins, especially Harvey Weinstein, who got wrecked from that and taken down completely. I think this works really well. It's shot really well. Is the weird like black magic kind of out of nowhere? Kind of. If it was just like a cult of the personality of the fraternity, I think that would have still worked. I don't know if you needed necessarily the black magic part of it, but I guess it works. Would I give this a thumbs up? Maybe a half a thumb, maybe a full thumb if you're looking for something to watch and you want to watch something that has a message that's gonna keep putting it in your face constantly. Because that's one thing where it's like you could be a little more subtle about the like Me Too, the rape culture and all that. You can be a little bit more subtle about it, but it really heavy-handedly puts it in your face through the whole film, which is, I think, a detriment too, because there is like a way to push like these themes and these ideas and these kind of things that you want to get across to people without having to like outright be like, yeah, me too, time's up, frat bros, just things like that. You could do it a little bit more subtle, and it could work too, especially when you have a perfect setting like sorority houses and fraternities. And I feel like you could have done it a little bit closer to the original. I think it still would have worked, where you could have been like, there's multiple killers, and it's the fraternity attacking the sorority house. But where else am I gonna go with that, right? Though I think Sofia Takal, I think for what she was given, especially coming from a producer who was like, yeah, women in horror doesn't exist. I think she does a pretty good job. I think she's able to take the story, make it more for today or that time. Does it live up to the original? No. Neither of these do, unfortunately. The original one, Black Christmas, is a classic for a reason. It's so simple. It's very ambiguous, but in the best way possible. Does the 2006 remake stand up? No. Honestly, forget about that one. If you do want to watch a remake, though, watch the 2019. And I even hesitate to say that one, too. Because, like I said, like maybe a thumbs up, maybe. But probably not even that. So, have you strung up your lights? Have you bought all your presents? Did you like these remakes, or is the classic still the gold standard? It's still the gold standard. Thank you all for listening, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe to get every new episode downloaded. Do you have any strange, mysterious, or unexplained stories? Are they fact? Did you craft a story yourself? If you'd like us to read your stories, you can email them to horrorboxpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to read them on the podcast. We'd also like to post the stories on our socials, on Instagram, Threads, or TikTok @horrorboxpodcast, where we also have updates and news. One last thing, if you like the podcast and would like to support the podcast, you can buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee at coffee.com/horrorboxpodcast. It'd really help out. We'll see you next time and hear what comes out from the horror box.